Jake Carter stood at the wide observation window of the diplomatic shuttle and watched Valari Prime grow larger beneath him. The planet looked like a swirl of emerald seas and bright silver clouds. Even from orbit, it felt calm and welcoming. Jake was only 24, a trainee on Earth's new diplomatic corps, and this was his first real mission. He told himself to breathe slowly, keep his thoughts clear, and remember every lesson his instructors had drilled into him. Smile. With the inside out. Ceremony followed the master of protocol. Jake nodded at the reminder. Still, he felt a spark of excitement. Humanity was finally meeting its distant neighbors. If all went well, an alliance could bring new medicines, clean energy, and faster star drives to both worlds. Jake imagined telling his younger sister back home that he had helped change history. The shuttle touched down on a shining crystal landing pad. 10 Valerian honor guards, tall and graceful, waited in perfect silence. Their skins shimmered with faint opalescent colors and thin silver bands circled their foreheads. Beside them stood Earth's senior envoy, Ambassador Dela Cruz, who gave Jake an encouraging nod. A gentle chime sounded. The ramp extended. Jake stepped into the warm, sweet air and felt light gravity lift the weight from his feet. Flowers as big as dinner plates lined the welcome plaza, releasing soft pink pollen that drifted like snow. Music, airy and bright, floated from unseen speakers. Everything seemed peaceful, almost like a dream. The master of Protocolla, Valerian, elder with bright violet eyes, raised one long hand and spoke in perfect English through a translator drone. Esteemed guests, please proceed in orderly fashion to the Hall of Confluence. The High Emperor and his court await. Jake joined the short procession behind Ambassador Dela Cruz. As they walked, she leaned back and whispered, "Remember, follow my lead. Bow when I bow. Speak only when addressed." Valerians prize calm behavior. "I understand," Jake whispered back. Hoping his voice did not shake, they entered the Hall of Confluence, a vast chamber with glass walls that showed soaring mountains outside. Valerian nobles sat in rising circles, each wearing shimmering robes of blue, green, or gold. At the far end on a raised dais sat the High Emperor, his head crowned with living vines that glowed pale white. At his right side stood Princess Alira. Jake had heard horror stories of royal children who acted cruel and spoiled. Alira did not fit that image. She looked perhaps a year older than Jake. Her robe was soft silver, tiny motes of light weaved through her long, jet-black hair. Her eyes, bright teal, seemed curious rather than cold. For one second, Jake forgot every speech he had rehearsed. Ambassador Dela Cruz bowed low. Jake followed her example and lowered his head. The Valerian court returned graceful inclinations. The Emperor spoke, his deep voice echoing across the hall. The translator drone rendered his words into English. "Children of Earth, welcome. May new stars shine upon our meeting." Applause rustled like wind through leaves. The ambassador replied with practiced dignity. Then, in a sudden shift, the Emperor smiled and motioned toward Jake. "And who is this young seeker standing at your side?" Jake stiffened. He had not expected to speak. The ambassador gestured for him to step forward. Jake swallowed, felt sweat at his neck, and walked 3 steps ahead. "Your Highness," he said, trying to project calm. "I am Cadet Jake Carter, learner of diplomacy, honored to meet you." The Emperor gave a soft nod. "A learner brave enough to travel these light years? Excellent. Alira, greet our visitor." Princess Alira descended the dais with effortless grace. As she approached, The hall grew silent. She stopped a respectful distance from Jake and inclined her head. "May peace flow between us," she said, her voice like distant bells. Jake's mind raced. What was the correct response? The briefing notes offered dozens of formal phrases, but he feared mangling them. And so, relying on simple Earth custom, he smiled warmly, stretched out his hand and said, "Pleased to meet you, Princess." Alira's eyes widened. Gasps broke the hush. Somewhere a flute's gentle melody cut off mid-note. Jake blinked, confused. He wondered if he had mispronounced her name. The princess stared at his extended hand as if it were a glowing blade. A faint blush colored her cheeks gold, not pink. Slowly, almost in slow motion, she lifted her own hand and placed it in his. Her skin felt cool, silken. Jake gave a polite pump, then released. He could sense every eye in the chamber locked on them. The Emperor rose from his throne. His voice sounded strained beneath composure. "Young seeker, you understand the right you have invoked?" Jake felt a chill. "I offered a handshake, Your Majesty. In my culture, it means friendly greeting." A murmur rippled through the nobles. The Emperor exchanged a long look with senior counselors, then addressed Jake again. "To shake the hand of a royal child is to request union marriage. As you would call it, the world tilted." Jake's heart hammered. He shifted his gaze to Ambassador Dela Cruz, who looked pale. She started to speak, but the Master of Protocol quietly raised her palm, urging calm. Princess Alira's expression was unreadable shock mixed with something like wonder. Jake stammered. "I meant no disrespect. On Earth, a handshake is only polite. I'm sorry, truly sorry." The Emperor lifted a silencing hand. "Tensions matter, but so do customs. Alira's honor is now bound to yours. If you withdraw, her reputation will bear the scar. The alliance we hope for could fail before it begins." Ambassador Dela Cruz stepped forward. "Your Highness, surely we can find a path that guards all. Dignity, allow us to confer." The Emperor considered, then signaled to guards. "The human shall be escorted to the guest pavilion. There, he will remain under royal protection while we deliberate." His eyes softened slightly. "Young Jake Carter, fear not. No harm will come to you. Yet the eyes of two worlds now rest upon your next choice." The guards, tall but gentle, guided Jake from the hall. As he turned, he caught one last glimpse of Alira. She still watched him, head tilted, curiosity burning bright. Jake managed a small, apologetic smile before the grand doors closed. The walk to the pavilion passed in blur. Starlit lanterns floated above manicured gardens. Somewhere, crystal fountains whispered, but Jake noticed none of it. His mind replayed the moment his hand met hers, the collective gasp, the Emperor's grave words. He felt like a child who had knocked over a priceless vase in a stranger's home. Except the vase was an interstellar treaty. Inside a high-ceilinged guest suite, Jake finally sat on a low couch. Ambassador Dela Cruz arrived minutes later. She spoke softly, choosing words like surgeon's tools. "We will explain the misunderstanding, but remember, saving face matters here. Direct rejection could spark a serious incident." Jake pressed, his palms together, still feeling the strange coolness of Alira's skin. "What should I do?" "For now," the ambassador said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder, "rest. Tomorrow, we meet the Emperor again. We may need you to accept temporary candidate status until we find a graceful exit. Keep calm, be respectful, and above all, no more spontaneous gestures." Jake managed a shaky laugh. Outside the window, Valaria's twin moons rose, silver and green. Somewhere under their light, a curious princess might be pondering the human, who greeted her like an old friend. Jake exhaled, realizing the first day of his mission had already changed his fate. He did not know what tomorrow would bring. But one thing was clear: a simple Earth handshake had just become the most consequential gesture in the galaxy. Jake woke up early the next morning, his heart still heavy with worry. The sky outside was filled with soft green light as Valari Prime's smaller sun rose. Birds with silver wings flew past his window. Everything looked beautiful and peaceful. But inside his mind, there was a storm. He had made a huge mistake. One simple handshake, a friendly human gesture, had turned into a royal engagement on an alien world. Now, the alliance between Earth and Valari Prime depended on how he handled the situation. A wrong word could start a political disaster. There was a soft chime at the door. Jake stood and took a deep breath. The door slid open, and a Valerian attendant bowed politely. "The Emperor requests your presence in the Garden of Thought," the attendant said. "The princess will join you there." Jake followed silently. The palace garden was unlike anything he had ever seen. Floating lights danced above silver trees, and gentle streams sang soft music as they flowed. Flowers glowed in pale shades of violet and blue. Princess Alira was already waiting under a tall tree with wide crystal leaves. Stood with her hands behind her back, looking up at the morning sky. When she saw Jake, she smiled slightly. "You came," she said. Jake bowed. "Yes, Your Highness." She rolled her eyes playfully. "Call me Alira. If you're going to be my future mate, we might as well start with first names." Jake's cheeks turned red. I didn't mean for that to happen. On Earth, a handshake is just friendly. I didn't know about your customs." Alira nodded slowly. "I know. My father understands too. But tradition is not easy to break. The court saw your handshake. The people heard of it, and now everyone watches." Jake sat on a smooth stone near her. "Can't we just explain it was a mistake?" Alira sat too, folding her silver robe around. We could. But in Valerian tradition, a royal cannot be rejected without shame. If I say you're not worthy, it wounds my pride. If you reject me, it wounds yours. Either way, both our worlds will feel the pain." Jake looked at her with concern. "And if I stay, what then?" Alira smiled gently. "Then you must prove yourself worthy in the eyes of our court. There are test and chant trials for anyone who seeks to stand beside a royal heir." Jake blinked. "Tests?" She nodded. 3 of them: courage, wisdom, and respect. Most of my past suitors failed. Before the second one, that's why I'm still single. Jake gave a nervous laugh. "Great. So now I have to pass alien exams just to fix a misunderstanding." Alira leaned closer, her tone soft. "Or maybe it's not a misunderstanding. Maybe the stars wanted this. I've met many proud nobles, many smooth talkers. Of them looked at me like you did, like I was just a person." Jake looked into her teal eyes. She wasn't mocking him. She meant every word. He didn't know what to say. Before he could answer, the master of protocol approached, her long robes gliding across the grass. "The Emperor is ready to see you both." They walked through the gardens and entered the royal chamber. Doriel, the Emperor, sat on his tall throne, surrounded by counselors and nobles. Jake bowed deeply, doing his best to remember every respectful gesture. The Emperor's voice was calm. "Jake Carter, the court has spoken. Your handshake has been seen by many as a promise. If you choose to step away now, our people will lose trust in Earth's honor. But if you accept the challenge and complete the trials, you may stay beside my daughter as an equal." Jake stood tall. "I didn't mean to offer marriage, Your Highness. But I won't run from what I've caused. I accept your challenge. I will complete the trials." Whispers filled the hall. Nobles looked at each other with surprise. The Emperor raised his hand and silence returned. "Very well," he said. "Your first trial will begin tomorrow at first light. You shall be tested in courage. You will face the mere beasts of the cavern temple and return with one of their shining feathers." Jake blinked. "Mirror beasts?" The Emperor smiled. "Faintly, they reflect not only light but fear. To face one is to face yourself. Alira will guide you to the temple, but she cannot help you inside." Alira stepped forward. "I will make sure he reaches the temple safely, Father." The Emperor nodded. "Then let it be so." That evening, Jake sat alone in his guest room. Staring at the moonlit sky, he had agreed to take part in alien trials he didn't understand, to defend a princess he had just met, and to save a peace treaty that could shape Earth's future. He picked up a small device on the table and recorded, "A message for Earth to the Diplomatic Council. I may have made the strangest first impression in history, but I believe I can fix this. The Valerians are proud, but fair. I'll complete the trials. And maybe, just maybe, this mistake was meant to be something more." As he ended the recording, he looked out the window and saw Alira standing on her balcony across the courtyard. She raised a hand in silent greeting. Jake smiled and waved back. The next morning, the sun rose with a soft green glow. The air in Valari Prime smelled like fresh rain and wildflowers. Jake stood near the gates of the palace, his heart beating fast. Today was the first trial, the trial of courage. He didn't know exactly what the mirror beasts were, but the name alone made him nervous. Princess Alira stood beside him, dressed in a light silver travel robe. Her long dark hair was tied back, and her eyes were calm. She noticed Jake's worried face and gave him a small smile.
"Ow."
"You'll be fine," she said gently. The mirror. Beasts do not attack. They show you your deepest fear. If you can face it and take one of their feathers, you pass. Jake looked down at his gloved hands. "What if I fail?" "Then you return with honor," she said. "But if you run away, the court will see it as weakness." A sleek hovercraft arrived. The pilot, a quiet Valerian, bowed and opened the side door. Jake and Alira stepped in, and the vehicle rose smoothly into the air. Mountains appeared on the horizon, tall, blue, and glowing at the edges. Alira sat quietly as they flew. Jake looked at her. "Have you ever done the trials?" "No," she said. "Only those who wish to join the royal bloodline must take them." "Do you think I can do it?" Alira turned to him, her expression serious but kind. "I think you're different from everyone I've ever met. You're not here for power. You're here because you care. That might be enough." The hovercraft landed near a cave entrance surrounded by crystal stones. The cavern temple looked like a mouth carved into the mountain. Faint lights flickered from inside. Alira placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. "The mirror beasts are peaceful. But once you enter, you must go alone. Speak with your heart, not your fear." Jake nodded and stepped into the cave. The air inside was cold and still. His boots echoed softly on the smooth stone floor. Strange reflections danced on the walls, though there were no mirrors. The deeper he went, the more the reflections moved like shadows. Suddenly, a large shape appeared ahead. It looked like a giant bird taller than Jake, with silver feathers that glowed like starlight. Its eyes were like polished glass. The mirror beast didn't move, but Jake felt a strange pull in his mind. Then the air shimmered. Another nutter version of himself appeared, angry, scared, and full of doubt. "This mirror," Jake shouted. "You don't belong here. You're just a kid from Earth. What do you know about honor or courage?" Jake froze. The voice sounded exactly like his own. It reminded him of every time he had failed, every time he had doubted himself. "Go home, coward." "The mirror," Jake shouted again. "This place isn't for you." Jake's heart pounded. He stepped back. But then he remembered Alira's words, "Speak with your heart, not your fear." He took a deep breath. "Yes, I'm scared. Yes, I made a mistake. But I'm not running away. I want to fix what I did. I want to learn. That's why I'm here." The mirror, Jake blinked, then slowly faded. The room became still again. The real mirror beast stepped forward. It lowered its head and gently dropped a shining feather at Jake's feet. Jake picked it up carefully. The feather was light as air, but glowed with a soft white light. He smiled. He had passed. When he walked back out into the sunlight, Alira was waiting. Her eyes lit up when she saw the feather in his hand. "You did it," she said, relief in her voice. Jake laughed nervously. "Barely. I met a version of myself who yelled at me. I didn't run." Alira placed a hand over her heart and bowed slightly, a gesture of deep respect. "You faced your fear. You've earned the court's respect." They returned to the palace by evening. The halls were full of quiet talk. Some nobles had heard of his success and were surprised that a human had passed the first trial. The next day, the second challenge began, the trial of wisdom. This time Jake was led into a large chamber filled with floating symbols, glowing cubes, and shifting puzzles. A Valerian scholar sat in the center, wearing robes made of woven light. "Welcome," said the scholar. "You will be given a diplomatic scenario. You must find a peaceful solution using logic, patience, and empathy." Jake sat before a holodisplay. A problem appeared. 2 alien colonies were fighting over a rare crystal deposit. Both sides had history, anger, and old wounds. Jake studied the data. He remembered what his instructors taught him back on Earth: listen first, then speak. Took a slow breath and looked for a win-win situation. After an hour, he gave his answer. "Both sides value tradition," he said. "So give each a part of the land and create a joint council. They will mine the crystals together. That way, they share both the resource and the responsibility." The scholar nodded slowly. "A wise choice. You pass." Later, in the gardens, Alira found him sitting under a tree. She smiled. "That was fast." Jake smiled back. "I didn't overthink it. I just asked myself, what would I do if I wanted peace?" "You're different," she said again. "Most suitors try to show how strong they are, but you show your strength in calm ways." Jake looked at her seriously. "What happens if I pass the 3rd trial?" "Then," Alira said softly, "you will have the right to stay by my side, not as a mistake, but as a true partner." Jake nodded, heart beating faster. Tomorrow was the final trial, the trial of respect. It would be the hardest yet. But, for the first time, Jake felt ready. He had come to fix a mistake. Now, he was discovering something greater. A new place. New people land, maybe. Something real with the alien princess he never meant to meet. The sun was still low when Jake woke up on the morning of the 3rd trial. Outside his window, soft golden light touched the palace gardens. Birds with glowing feathers sang a slow, sweet tune. Inside Jake's chest, his heart beat fast. Today was the final test, the trial of respect. He dressed in the simple clothes given to him by the palace, a white tunic with silver edges, a soft belt, and boots that adjusted to his steps. He didn't feel like a hero or a royal candidate. He just felt like himself, Jake Carter, a young man from Earth who had shaken the wrong hand. But he wasn't running. Not anymore. A palace guide came to fetch him, bowing politely. "The trial begins now. Honored guest, please follow." Jake walked through marble halls and glowing doorways until he reached a quiet chamber. It was round with high windows and soft light falling on smooth stone floors. At the center stood the High Emperor with his royal advisors beside him. Lyra stood quietly nearby, her hands folded in front of her. The Emperor's voice echoed in the chamber. "Jake Carter of Earth, you have passed the trials of courage and wisdom. Today we test your heart. The trial of respect is not about power or puzzles. It is about listening, understanding, and seeing another's truth." Jake bowed low. "Ready, Your Highness?" A side door opened. An elderly Valerian woman entered. Her long white hair flowed like silk, and her steps were slow but full of grace. She bowed to the court, then looked directly at Jake. "I am Elder Renari." She said, "I will speak my story. You will listen. You will not interrupt. When I am done, you will speak only if you truly understand." Jake nodded. "I will listen." The elder began to speak, her voice calm and steady. She told the story of her village long ago. Human mining ship had landed nearby by mistake. The humans had not meant to disturb anyone, but they're loud. Machines had broken the sacred grounds of her people. The flowers they used in their ceremonies died. The songs of the birds stopped. The sky above the temple lost its glow. She paused, her eyes full of old sadness. The humans said sorry and left. But the damage remained. They never asked what they had broken. They never waited to learn why it mattered. Jake felt her words deeply. His chest tightened. He had never heard this story before. Earth's records had no mention of such a mistake. Elder Renari continued, "Respect is not just kind words. It is the act of seeing someone else's world, even when it is different from your own, Do you understand? Stepped forward slowly. He didn't try to defend Earth. He didn't offer excuses. I understand, he said quietly. My people move fast. We're new to space, but that doesn't excuse not listening, I think. Maybe I made the same mistake. I didn't stop to learn what a handshake meant to you. I just did what was normal for me. The elder nodded slowly. That is why this trial matters. You listened, Jake Carter. You did not try to erase my pain. You saw it. You have passed the final trial. The court murmured in approval. Some of the nobles even gave small nods of respect. Jake let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Then the emperor raised his hand for silence. But now, he said, we face a choice. The trials are complete. By our law, Jake Carter is now worthy to stand beside my daughter as her chosen mate. Alira stepped forward. Her face was calm, but her eyes shone brightly. The emperor continued, but worthiness does not mean agreement. The final decision lies with two hearts, not law, not court. Jake Carter, do you choose to stay on Valari Prime and take your place? Beside Alira, not as punishment, but as a path you truly want? Jake looked at Alira. He remembered how kind she had been from the beginning, how she never blamed him, how she smiled, laughed, and helped him understand this strange new world. She was not just a princess. She was strong, smart, and curious just like him. I came here by accident, Jake said, but now I'm not sure it was a mistake. I've learned more in a few days than I did in years. And I've come to respect you, Alira, truly. So, yes, I choose to stay. A quiet gasp moved through the court. Then all eyes turned to the princess. Alira stepped closer. She smiled, not the small, polite smile of a royal, but a real one. I was never interested in arranged matches, she said, but Jake is different. He made me laugh. He made me think. And he faced every trial with courage and honesty. I choose him. The emperor bowed his head, and let it be written. Let it be known. The chamber lit up with warm light. Bells rang from distant towers. The joining ceremony would be prepared in the days to come, but the choice had already been made. A human and a Valerian, joined by accident, and now by will later that night. Jake stood on a balcony with Alira. The stars above Valari Prime shimmered like scattered diamonds. So, Jake said with a smile, do I call you your Highness now? Or just Alira? She laughed softly. If we're going to be partners, I think Alira is fine. Jake looked at the stars. I never expected any of this, but I'm glad it happened. So am I, she said. Far below, lights from the city sparkled. Far beyond, Earth and Valari Prime were now closer than ever, not just because of treaties, but because of a handshake and a choice. The trials were over. But a new journey was just beginning. The next morning, the palace buzzed with energy. Messengers moved quickly through the long crystal halls. Courtiers whispered in the gardens. Across Valari Prime, news had spread. The human Jake Carter had passed the royal trials, and both he and Princess Alira had accepted each other. But not everyone was pleased. Some Valerian nobles believed that humans were too young a species, too wild and unpredictable. Others feared that traditions were being broken too quickly. Was confused. The Human Diplomatic Council had sent a message requesting Jake's return for urgent talks. Jake stood in the center of the Grand Council chamber. Dressed in a formal robe with Earth's symbol on one sleeve and Valari's on the other, light shined down from a glass dome above. Before him sat the full royal court. Behind him, a large screen glowed with the live transmission of Earth's leaders. Ambassador Dela Cruz stood nearby, her face calm but serious. She had supported Jake from the start, but now the moment had come where he had to speak, not just for himself but for both worlds. The High Emperor's voice echoed in the chamber. Jake, Carter of Earth, you have faced our trials. You have earned respect. But now there is unrest. Some ask, why should one handshake decide the future of two great peoples? Others question whether this bond is real or a moment of confusion. The ambassador from Earth appeared on the screen. He looked firm, but not angry. Cadet Carter, your actions have created great change. You must understand, are you acting as an individual or as a representative of all humanity? Jake stepped forward. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice was steady. I came to Valari Prime as a student, he said. Was nervous. I didn't know all your customs. I made a mistake, a simple handshake, but that mistake opened a door. He paused, making eye contact with both the court and the Earth screen. I didn't come here to make promises, but I stayed because I saw something more. I saw a people, full of honor, wisdom, and deep feeling. I saw a princess who showed me respect before I even understood how much she was risking by doing so. He turned to Alira, who stood beside her father. She could have rejected me. She didn't. She gave me a chance to learn. And now, I want to give something back. Jake faced the court again. Valari Prime and Earth are two very different worlds. But that's not a weakness, it's a strength. I believe this bond between me and Alira can be a symbol. Not of accident, but of understanding. Of what's possible when we try. One of the Valerian nobles stood up. And what do you propose, human? A royal wedding between two strangers from distant worlds? Jake smiled slightly. Not here to change your traditions. I respect them. But I have a proposal not just for Alira and me, but for both. Our peoples. He raised his voice with confidence. Let us begin a cultural exchange treaty. Not just trade, not just science, but learning. Stories, art, traditions. A chance for humans to understand Valerians before we judge. And for Valerians, to see humans not as careless, but curious, brave, and ready to grow. There was a long silence. The court listened. The Earth delegation listened. And then slowly, the Emperor stood. You speak not like a student, the Emperor said, but like a bridge. Perhaps that is what we need, not a perfect prince, or a flawless diplomat, but someone who sees both sides, dares to connect them. Ambassador Dela Cruz stepped forward. Supports this idea. Let us begin this treaty of cultural sharing. Let us learn from each other through respect and patience. Princess Alira moved beside Jake. This bond between us. It began by accident, but now I choose it freely, not because I have to, but because I want to see what we can become together. The screen from Earth blinked, then showed the human council standing together. The lead speaker smiled. Then Earth agrees. Let history remember this day not as a mistake, but as the beginning of something new. Soft music began to play. The chamber filled with quiet applause. Even the doubtful nobles offered short bows. Jake felt his breath catch. Somehow the weight on his chest had lifted. He had spoken his truth, and both worlds had listened. Later that evening, as the twin moons rose high in the sky, Jake and Alira walked through the palace gardens. The trees glowed gently, and the streams whispered like wind chimes. You were brave, Alira said softly. I was scared the whole time, Jake admitted, but I meant every word. She smiled. That's the kind of courage I admire. They stopped near a small pool, where glowing fish swam in slow circles. Jake looked at her. So what happens next? We start planning the new treaty, Alira said. Valerian students may visit Earth. Humans might walk our libraries. Poets, scientists, teachers. It will take time, but it's real. Jake nodded. And us. Alira reached out her hand. Jake smiled and gently took it this time, knowing exactly what it meant. We take our time, she said. We write our story, one page at a time. And as the stars watched from above, a human and an alien princess stood hand in hand. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Not a mistake, not a duty, but a choice shared between two hearts, two worlds, and one future. Weeks passed on Valari Prime, and the sky slowly changed from soft green mornings to violet sunsets. The people had grown used to seeing the human, Jake Carter, walking the palace gardens, speaking with scholars or laughing gently beside Princess. Alira, what once had been a mistake, was now something that Valerian spoke of with quiet respect. Jake had come far from that nervous moment when he had offered a handshake. Now, He was being called the bridge between stars by some, and the accidental hero by others. But to him, he was just Jake, guy who made a mistake, tried to fix it the right way. The palace was preparing for a new celebration, not a royal wedding, as the court once expected, but something more meaningful. The Day of Union, a new tradition to honor Earth and Valerie Prime's friendship. There would be music, shared stories, food from both worlds, and the signing of the cultural exchange treaty Jake had suggested that morning. Jake stood in front of a mirror adjusting his collar. His formal robe was light gray with blue trim. Made by Valerian hands but shaped in Earth style, it felt strange but right, a mix of both worlds. The same way his heart felt when he thought of Ali Ra. There was a knock at the door. Jake opened it and smiled. Princess Alira stood there wearing a gown made from silver threads that shimmered in the light. Her hair was braided with tiny glowing flowers. She looked elegant, but her eyes were as warm and familiar as ever. "You look nervous," she said playfully. Jake chuckled. "Only a little. I've never helped start a holiday before." She smiled and held out her hand. "Then, let's do it together." They walked side by side through the palace halls. Guards bowed. Courtiers smiled. Servants offered soft words of blessing. But Jake noticed something more important than all that. He and Alira were not just symbols now. They were real to the people. Their story had become something bigger, something hopeful. The grand courtyard was full of life. Valerians and humans stood together, watching the ceremony platform where the High Emperor waited. Ambassador de la Cruz was also there, wearing a proud smile. Behind them, banners of Earth and Valari Prime floated side by side. The Emperor raised his hand, and silence filled the space. "Today," he said, "we do not celebrate power. We do not celebrate bloodlines. We celebrate understanding." His gaze moved across the crowd, then rested on Jake and Alira. Two young people, one human. One Valerian chose each other not by law, but by heart. From a single mistake, a new path has opened. May it lead us to peace, knowledge, and unity. Ambassador de la Cruz stepped forward. The Earth Council agrees. What began with fear and confusion has become a bridge of trust. Let this be the first of many days of union. Cheers rose from the crowd. Music began, soft and joyful. Valerian flutes blended with human violins. Dancers moved in spirals, wearing patterns from both cultures. Jake and Alira walked to a small table where the treaty documents lay. Together, they signed their names to simple signatures, but ones that would be remembered in history books across two worlds. As they stepped back, Jake turned to Alira. "So, no royal wedding?" Alira raised an eyebrow with a teasing smile. "Not unless you want one. Valerian law now allows us to choose. You earned that change." Jake laughed. "Let's just enjoy the moment." They spent the afternoon walking among the people. Children ran up to Jake asking questions about Earth. Some even offered him flowers or drawings. Valerian elders nodded in approval as he bowed politely and listened to their stories. Later, as the twin moons rose into the purple sky, Jake and Alira found themselves alone in the quiet garden where they had first spoken weeks ago. "It feels like a dream," Jake said softly. "I came here scared, and now everything's different." "You changed us, Jake," Alira said. "Not by force, but by listening, by being yourself." Jake looked at her, thoughtful. "And you gave me a chance to grow. You didn't have to, but you did." She stepped closer, her voice calm. "Do you still want to stay?" Jake smiled. "I do, not because I have to, but because I want to. Valari feels like home now." Alira nodded slowly. "Then there's one more thing." She took his hand again, just like she did that first day, but this time the meaning was shared, understood by both. No shock, no confusion, just calm certainty. "I offer you this bond, Jake Carter, not as a duty, not because of tradition, but because I choose you." Jake felt warmth fill his chest. He held her hand tighter. "And I choose you, Alira, not as a princess. As a person." Above them, the stars twinkled brighter. Light wind stirred the glowing trees. In that moment, there were no diplomats, no laws, no trials. Just two souls who had found each other across light years. And so, the story that began with a simple handshake ended not with a crown or a title but with a choice. A choice made freely between equals. A new chapter for Earth and Velari. Prime had begun, and at the heart of it stood a human boy and an alien princess hand in hand, smiling at the future,